Always a pleasure. Alex, thanks so much for coming on the show.
It is always a pleasure. It's good to see you, Emma.
Good to see you. And, you know, I was just saying to you in the break, it's hard to think about anything else except Gaza. And it has felt like the pressure on Biden is increasing on daily, right? I mean, we're seeing articles come out like in HuffPost. I have it printed out here actually because I want to give this reporter credit over there. He's been doing incredible work, and I did not write down the name of the author. If you don't mind looking that up, Bradley. But basically reporting on how there's this White House aide, Brett McGurk, who is leading Middle East policy, and he's been a guy that's been involved in the Bush administration, the Obama administration, the Trump administration, just kind of a career deep state guy, for lack of a better phrase. And he has these absolutely insane plans. And the reporter, Akbar Shahid Ahmed, doing wonderful work over there at HuffPost, he's floating these insane plans that are beyond delusional. They're a continuation of the Trump administration's push to normalize relationships between Saudi Arabia and Israel, which is understood to be one of the reasons that Hamas attacked. It was another choking off of an Arab ally, a major one in the region, even though, of course, Saudi Arabia has been on the United States' side for a while. But basically, it was the idea of not involving the Palestinians in the process whatsoever. Even during the time, people were criticizing Trump for that policy. And now the Biden administration is basically trying to implement the exact same thing, the Abraham Accords, or considering doing so. And then in this 90-day plan, when Israel and Saudi Arabia normalize, then Mohammed bin Salman and Saudi Arabia will take over Gaza and be their representative. Because I don't know if you know this, Alex, but they're both Arabs.
Yeah, so therefore, they're essentially the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Like it doesn't, exactly.
Easy peasy.
Like that's the same thing as self-determination. Just have some other group of people who happen to also be Arab be in charge.
And also who happen to be completely aligned with United States interests. And in the region, it's widely understood that Saudi Arabia and the United States have a close relationship. And that it's a joke that Saudi Arabia would adequately represent Palestinian interests.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, I think, I mean, the I don't know, the McGurk, and I remember I've been reading about him for a little while and was sort of, I guess, like when I realized he was still in the Biden administration and still had this position, it was like actually kind of shocking. Like at this point now I'm used to it, but it was like, it really is a lot of what I think you could have said the worst case scenarios predicting what a Biden administration would be like all coming to pass in terms of what they would be like in foreign policy, right? Essentially the no lessons learned wing of the Democratic Party, like just coming back and being like, we are just going to run this the way we have always run things. And if anything, more stubbornly and recklessly, I think, even than they would have in the past. And I think what has been a little bit surprising is seeing now finally some evidence that congressional Democrats are actually, they're calling on McGurk. Some of them are calling on McGurk to be fired, basically. But like, there's some evidence of some cracks in the party. Yes. But for the administration itself, it's been really appalling in this way that you wanted to hope it wouldn't have gotten this bad.
I'm curious about your take on that move, potentially Democrats trying to get McGurk to resign, because it feels a little bit like a way to signal to the White House that many Democrats do not want to continue to go down this path, but also absolve Biden in the public's eyes from his responsibility, because let's be real, like the buck stops with Biden. This NatSec dude, or this, the State Department guy, McGurk is not determining foreign policy. Like,
but
it is good reporting, great reporting on what he's doing. But, the efforts from the Democrats to do this, it feels like they're trying to have it both ways to this degree. And I just think that that's interesting because maybe there's a growing understanding that this actually might have electoral consequences, which Biden seems to be completely dismissive of at this point.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And I think you nailed the sort of political aspect of this, which is an attempt at a face-saving move. Because as you say, Joe Biden is obviously, this is not his first rodeo. He is not a neophyte on foreign policy. He is like Mr. Senate, Mr. Foreign Policy for years and years and years.
Mr. Israel.
Mr. Israel, like Mr. Middle East, like
of exactly. How in Mother Jones, or actually it was Beinart, but they revived it recently to reiterate. I mean, he undercut Obama and Hillary Clinton, who were trying to get tougher with Netanyahu on settlements, and he went around them and screwed them over. Hillary Clinton and Obama are the good guys in this story.
I know. And so that's why I do think when you have Democrats saying you got to fire McGurk, it's a little bit what's the saying about the czar being betrayed by his ministers or whatever, right? Like they're being like, oh, come on, Joe. Like it's an attempt to do some face saving because I think they know this is a much bigger problem politically than Joe Biden does think. But yeah, I mean, obviously, he's the guy determining his foreign policy, like he is. So I don't know. I think like. There is I'm not sure if and when it will sink in to the White House that they will actually face, I think, pretty bad political consequences for not actually working to de-escalate instead of this sort of really transparent escalation that's done in this style of like, oh, we're doing our best not to make things worse, but like we just keep being forced to make things worse over and over again. Like no one is really falling for that. And again, like we're seeing the worst instincts of the worst Democratic foreign policy people all being indulged right now.
This is a short clip of Joe Biden from yesterday. He was speaking to the press outside of the White House, and he was asked about the airstrikes that he's carrying out in Yemen, which he's continuing to do. As a reminder, Yemen is one of the poorest countries in the world. It has been besieged by a proxy war waged by Saudi Arabia with U.S. money and the Iran-backed Houthis for nearly a decade at this point, with unimaginable suffering happening at our hand in many ways. Yep. And there was a pullback of that. That was progress. But because the Yemenis and some Houthis as well, who now basically control the north of Yemen, as Yemen's in this kind of purgatory of leadership, right? Like there's no real formal kind of structure for the government right now because it's just factions. The established government that Saudi Arabia was propping up, and the United States, and the Houthi militants that have taken over much of the north. But they are expressing solidarity with the Palestinian people and saying, we are going to disrupt trade in our backyard in the Red Sea, one of the most important shipping lanes in the world for global commerce, until a ceasefire is called for. This seems like a very rational choice by a state to make. I mean, their government's not that formal, but this is if this was happening to a neighbor of the United States, we would be doing the exact same thing and worse.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
But Biden, instead of taking them at their word, saying, if you call for a ceasefire, this will stop, he's striking Yemen, killing people. And this was his response when he was asked if those airstrikes are even working.
Are the airstrikes in Yemen working?
Well, when you say working, are they stopping the Houthis? No. Are they going to continue? Yes.
Right.
Are they stopping the Houthis? No. Are they going to continue? Yes.
Yeah,
It's like
Also, there's like some traffic going on behind you, which is hilarious.
know,
But
I'm-
just
yeah.
pointing that out for the podcast audience.
Yeah.
New York City.
it's that
Yeah.
quote. It's that sort of like memeable quote where it's like the airstrikes will continue until morale improves.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, that's what is that, like, the last half century of American foreign policy in one nutshell right there. I mean,
yes.
I think like Spencer Ackerman made some really good point about this entire affair, where it was like we what we're really good at is sort of justifying or finding ways to justify our military actions, and what we're really bad at is explaining how they will have the desired effect. And this is a prime example of that. Like, we can say, Joe Biden can go out there and say, here's why we feel we are justified in these airstrikes. And he cannot plausibly come out there and say, and here's why we think this will achieve a positive result. Like, it's a complete fantasy to imagine like this is the action that will lead to the result that will actually like work for anyone. And yet we are forced down this path as if we have no other choice.
And the other choice is clear, as I just said.
Yeah, no, I know.
You don't need to give a shit about the Palestinian people, Biden. If all you care about is commercial shipping not being disrupted, call for a ceasefire and be done with it. But the problem is that he is ideologically committed to the righteousness of Israel. We had Peter Beinart on this program, who this quote just rings in my head every time we talk about Biden's kind of position on Israel, which is that Americans who are more willing to challenge the founding myths of our country as a promised land on a hostile frontier are also more willing to challenge the myths of Israel as a promised land on a hostile frontier. And Biden's romanticism about America is like delusional. Certainly,
yeah, no, but it's definitely part and parcel with
but he copy and pasted onto Israel. Is my guess.
Yeah, and you see, they are the other country that gets the benefit of this insane American attitude of the kind of what you were just describing, where like other countries aren't allowed to sort of have autonomy or aren't allowed. It's considered stepping over some line for another country to act in the way that we routinely act, whether it be threatening to disrupt trade as part of a strategy to exert influence in the world, which is like something we do routinely as a matter of course. But if another country does it, it's an act of war. And in the minds of these American foreign policy establishment types like Joe Biden, above all, the only other country that gets the benefit of the doubt is Israel. The only other country that gets to act with impunity in a way that all other countries aren't allowed to act. And there's a lot of complicated ideological reasons for that. And I think Beinart and you nailed one of them. But it is really remarkable when you just look at among this crowd, like these are the two countries that are allowed to act in ways we don't allow any other country to act.
It also intersects with racism in the sense that the inability to really conceive of other state actors in the Middle East operating with the same kind of incentives for their own sovereignty, their own economic prosperity, their allyship with other Arabs within the region in opposition to Israel. And then it just gets kind of poo-pooed as they're anti-Semites.
And you definitely...
Yeah,
you see this all. You see this all the time when you look at the last, several years of U.S. foreign policy positions on Iran, especially, and they're treated as if their motivation is that they're cackling villains in a sort of opera. Like, they're not treated as like a normal country that is doing the sort of things normal countries do to exert influence within their sphere, good and obviously bad, but like acting as a normal country would, like with sovereignty and in its own political interests in a way that is rational and understandable. But they're never treated that way. They're always treated as acting out of malice or evil or anti-Semitism or hatred. And when you approach it from that lens, it does not lead to you making rational decisions about foreign policy.
Well, and let's be clear too. I mean, Iran has been the calm hand over the past 5 or 6 years as
Yeah.
it well, before that too, because they engaged, and credit to Obama, with the Iran nuclear deal, which was
Yep.
obviously one of Netanyahu was vocally opposed to. He did that whole weird PowerPoint presentation, if you recall, showing how they actually had nukes, which got debunked immediately because, I mean, Netanyahu grew up in a Philly suburb. Like he went to an elite university here in the United States. You look at some of these far right cabinet officials, so many of them are, dual citizens of the U.S. and come from a neoconservative educational tradition here in the U.S., indistinguishable from Dick Cheney, except for the fact that they have all of they're completely unshackled from kind of like any, I don't know, domestic, any more kind of checks and balances on what they're doing to a population, because the Palestinian people, well, I guess that's honestly, it's not really different at all. So I was trying to make some sort of distinction.
I know. I do sort of know what you mean, though. Where it's like they because their domestic political audience, is different than the American political audience. There is, I think, things that they feel like they can get away with, right? But you're right that they are, like, in their ideology and in their politics, they are very American, and or at least, like, it's not necessarily, like, maybe not necessarily that they're very American, but that there's a sort of shared heritage. I think is maybe a more accurate way to put it. There's a shared heritage between the two. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and just to bring it back to Iran, essentially, if Iran had assassinated Rex Tillerson at the time.
My God, I know. Yeah, I know. I
which
always,
is what we did, and they chose not to escalate. I mean, and it's just amazing to me how Iran is portrayed as the aggressor when it comes to our Middle Eastern policy.
Yeah, and when you look at the like, it's the history dating back way before that. I mean, cyber attacks, economic warfare, targeted assassinations. Like, we are constantly stirring the pot and constantly, like, and not engaging in Cold War, but engaging in hot war actions against Iran, but acting aggressively in the region in general, and because of our national myth of innocence and our national myth of righteousness, like, we never consider it in that way. We never think, oh boy, we're being really super aggressive here. We just think we're acting normally, and any response is aggression and escalation.
Don't you guys remember in 1953 when Iran overthrew Eisenhower?
Yeah, that's right.
Oh,
Who can forget? Yeah.
Wait, sorry.
Yeah.
Never mind. I think I might have gotten that mixed up.
And you know what's amazing? Former Prime Minister, it was Benny Gantz. Can you just clarify that it was Benny Gantz in the Wall Street Journal op-ed like a few weeks ago saying it's time to do regime change in Iran. The United States and Israel needs to engage. That provocation is so, given the history that Bradley just kind of sarcastically alluded to. Yeah. We are so arrogant on the world stage in that way, because if this kind of language was being published by it was Naftali Bennett, sorry, not Benny Gantz, I apologize, another former Israeli prime minister saying this, like, it would be Armageddon.
Right. I mean, we take it as a sort of justification for aggression when like people marching in the street in other countries say bad things about America. Like, we take that as a huge insult, and we and our allies, like, routinely and blithely say we're going to topple your government, or like, we intend to topple your government.
Right.
And it's just nuts that we think that that's like a completely legitimate way to go about doing business with other sovereign states.
Yes, right. Yeah, apologies. It was not Gantz for sure, and he was just the alternate PM. Not it was Naftali Bennett. But let's play this clip here. These two of Netanyahu and Ben Gvir. So the United States continues to say that the stated position of the country is that we are trying to incentivize a two-state solution. First of all, it's completely out the window, in my opinion, the possibility of that. Israel's been in violation of international law since 1967, where they've taken so much Palestinian territory. What would a Palestinian state even look like without clawing back so much Israel territory? It needs to be one democratic state from the river to the sea with equal rights for all. And it can call it Israel-Palestine. They can have
they can have a referendum to decide what to call it.
Great, wonderful, and then they can kind of operate separately in some ways, except on major matters of trade and diplomacy. That can all be ironed out, but we are a ways away from that, because when Biden is saying two-state solution, every major Democrat is saying two-state solutions. Even progressive Democrats continue to buy into this fiction. They're saying that's what we need to move towards. And at the same time, the guy that we're giving billions and billions of dollars to just said this yesterday.
For 30 years, I am very consistent, and I'm saying something very simple. This conflict is not on the lack of a state of Palestinian, but the existence of a state, the Jewish state. Every area that we evacuate, we receive terrible terror against that. It happened in South Lebanon, in Gaza, and also Judea and Samaria, which we did it. And therefore, I clarify that in any other arrangement, in the future, the state of Israel have to control on the entire area from the river to the sea. This is what happens when you have sovereignty. This truth I say to our American friends. And I also stopped the attempt to impose us a reality that will jeopardize us. A prime minister in Israel has to be able to say no, even to the best of friends. To say no when you need to, and to say yes when you can.
Maybe Biden should try saying no.
It's a bitterly ironic for an Israeli prime minister to say, well, sometimes you got to say no to your friends.
Sometimes when someone's giving you a huge pile of cash and says, well, will you spend this in this way, please? You can say, go fuck yourself. I'm spending it to do a genocide.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, it is. I feel like we to some extent have been doing this kind of dance for a few years now. But you see, especially when right-wing Israeli politicians, especially Netanyahu, are honest about what their intentions are. You think it should be a wake-up call to American friends of Israel about what the reality of the situation is, and it just doesn't. I mean, whatever. It just doesn't for lots of reasons. It does not seem to break through. But it is absolutely the case that if American politicians and the Democratic Party actually believed in a two-state solution, this is not how they would be acting. I mean, they just wouldn't. And so therefore, I think it's very easy, very justified to say that everyone who claims to believe in a two-state solution is just lying to save face, because if any of them believed in it, they would not be acting the way they are right now. We would have a very different attitude towards this Israeli government if that's what we actually believed in.
The value of the two-state solution conversation was that liberals, Zionists could stomach it, basically. Yep. It was not very realistic, 20 years ago when we were talking about it. Yeah. It's impossible now. Yeah. Impossible.
Yeah, exactly. There was the closest that we got in recent times was like the 90s, and it has not been remotely getting any closer since then.
And even in that scenario, it is still a situation in which it's two ethno-states or whatever. I mean, and one ethno-state that is a colonial one, and the other where
one of them dominating the other still.
Exactly, and the second state for Palestinians, if it's not just in any way, but just like in terms of what it would look like, would they have the same ability to have the access to the sea, right? For trade, for economic opportunity. I mean, what would that state look like except for Israel with all of its economic might and power taking taking all of the shipping kind of the ports, the you know what I'm saying, the border to the sea, choking off the ability for the Palestinian people to like have prosperity, essentially. I mean, it's a fiction. And yet the Biden administration continues to repeat it to justify its support of Israel. Even as Netanyahu says publicly, we're not doing it. And by the way, he's been saying this publicly. It's been inherent to his ideology for his entire public life.
Yes. That's exactly right. Yep. And they're not, again, they don't hide this stuff. They say it openly. Yeah. And it's rarely acknowledged by their allies here.